and take a seat. Who are we missing? We have Devaleena. No? Yes, this is your panel. Yafrainy. Right. Okay, thank you. Please have a seat next to, here we go. All right. All right, excellent.
Yeah, really.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Let's see. Good morning. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to ask folks to please, take a seat and turn off your cell phone notifications, ringers, dingers, sound makers, please, if you would. That said, I invite you, of course, to Insta post us, whatever that is. But we do not tweet at Meridians for, I think, possibly obvious reasons. We do, however, do Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and invite you to take photos and post those on any of those platforms with hashtag @Meridians, whatever the strategy is, okay? So good morning. It is my extraordinary pleasure to welcome you to Smith College and this opening panel of our Milestones and Momentum, the Meridians Project at 25 celebration. My name is Janetta Candelario, and I am a faculty member at Smith College in Sociology, Latin American, Latino Studies, and an affiliate of the program in the study of women and gender and sexuality here at Smith. And since 2017, I have been the editor of the journal Meridians, which has been an extraordinary honor and pleasure. I think most of you in this room were here last night when we had our opening celebratory event, a keynote roundtable featuring the folks whose support and vision really launched Meridians and has sustained it now over the past 25 years. I've told several of the folks who I saw today that I wish everyone could have seen what those of us sitting in the front could see, which was, first of all, the gorgeous mosaic of that room. It was such a beautiful representation of the world as it actually is, not as it's usually represented in halls of power and higher education. And that was incredibly uplifting for all of us at the front. And I do know that wherever you were seated in the room, you felt the vibe, right? You felt the energy of the importance of the work that we have done as a collective and why it matters, right? Which is so often hard to remember when we're sitting in front of our solitary screens or in our offices or in meetings, the interminable meetings that we have to do as faculty members and otherwise. But I just really want to, again, affirm for you that it does matter in ways sometimes that may not be immediately clear to you, right? But when we teach the work, when we read the work, when we sit with it, we are reminded that it matters, okay? And so it is really my pleasure to offer you just a small sample of what Meridians has been publishing since the fall of 2000. Before I do, though, as always, I think it's so important to give thanks and to acknowledge over and over and over again the folks whose labor and support make these events possible and make our work possible. So I'll start once again with President Sarah Willie LeBreton for her support for the Meridians Project, and as you heard last night, her love of the project. And our efforts to globalize what we mean by transnational women of color feminist knowledge production, the Project on Women and Social Change for providing some of the grant funding that enabled us to undertake the planning and execution of key parts of this event, our partners in Alumni Relations and Development, and I'm going to say it again, especially Maria Wexler, who's here with her mom today, whose mom is joining us, which I'm especially grateful for, Ms. Susan Wexler. Thank you for being here. As well as Jackie DeFelice and Portia Watson, who are not here today, but were here last night. Of course, I have to thank our incomparable alumni donors, particularly our anonymous lead donor. By the way, is a woman of color who was a classmate of mine. That wasn't why she did it, but it was nice to know that we shared this space together in the 80s, whose $1 million gift established the Meridians Endowment Fund, and in particular to Sylvia Cookie Lewis, class of 1974, which to date, by the way, is the largest class of admitted Black students to Smith College. 65 Black women were admitted that year. We have never again managed to hit that kind of, once we did, Maria? Okay, good to know. Thank you for that correction. I'm really pleased to hear that. I mean, it only took us 50 years, but we did it, right? Okay. Yes, so Cookie Lewis, class of 74, has been a believer in this journal's mission and has put her money where her mouth is and been a really generous donor. And for that, we are very grateful, as well as others, including Wendy Castle, who's also here today participating as an attendee. So thank you, Wendy, for your support of Meridians. And I don't think I can say this enough times or strongly enough, but really it's the Meridian staff that has helped to materialize this. So I'm going to ask those of you who are in the room to stand up when I say your name, remain standing and take the round of applause that you have so richly earned and deserve. Leanna Owen, Administrative Manager. Alex Terrell, Administrative Assistant Editorial Coordinator, who, by the way, just got a contract from Macmillan for her novel. Yeah. Ask Alex about it later, because she won't tell you unless you do. Carolina de la Piane, Ada Comstock Scholar Events Coordinator. And our amazing student intern team, Molly Doyle, Mia Huang, outworking, okay. Chiamaka Coron, outworking. Angeli, outworking, okay. And Lynn Tran. Okay, so we'll signal them when they come in. All right. Thank you all. I have to tell you, I don't think I said this last night. All of these folks have only been with Meridians 3 months, 6 weeks in terms of the students. Carolina has been working with us since January, but on a part-time basis. You wouldn't know it because what she's been doing is full-time quality work, okay? So, you know, this is just so important to acknowledge and recognize, and thank you for again. And as you may have gathered, I'm kind of an exacting manager. So they've done it, and I'm really grateful from the bottom of my heart. And as always, the Smith College events, catering, facilities, and ITS staff who make all the technical material aspects of these events possible. And last but not least, of course, our esteemed panelists who are joining us today. My fairly recent colleague here at Smith College, who we were fortunate enough to be able to steal away from the University of Minnesota, where she spent the first half of her career, to Smith College just a few years ago. Dr. Richa Nagar, who is the inaugural Gloria Steinem 56 Endowed Chair in Women and Gender Studies here at Smith College. Richa has published 9 books and dozens of essays, articles, plays, and poems, and their translations in English and Hindi. Her many awards and honors include the 2021 International Studies Association's Global Development Studies Book Award for Hungry Translations, the American Association of Geographers 2019 James Blott Award for Socialist and Critical Geography, and the Gloria Anzaldúa Book Prize, honorable mention for Muddying the Waters, and the Russell M. and Elizabeth M. Bennett Chair in Excellence, and the Beverly Richard Fink Professorship in Liberal Arts at the University of Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Richa Nagar. Professor Devaleena Das is an associate professor of body, sexuality, and health at the University of Minnesota Medical School, where she co-directs the social and community health curriculum for medical students pursuing the MD. For more than a decade, she has taught and researched in women, gender, and sexuality studies program in the United States. She serves as co-editor of Philosophy, Ethics, and Humanities in Medicine, and series editor of Palgrave Studies in Contemporary Women's Writing. Das is the author and co-editor of 5 books, and her forthcoming monograph, Anatomophilia, The Liberation of the Body from SUNY Press, offers a transnational introduction to decolonial epistemologies in body studies, centering the lived experience and agency of marginalized bodies in the global South. Her awards and honors include the Educational Innovation Award from the University of Minnesota Medical School, the Innovation Impact Case Award, the highest research award from the university's Research and Innovation Office, recognition as an outstanding professor and researcher of international renown by the United States Citizen and Immigration Services, and the Australia-India Youth Dialogue Leadership Award, which she declined. Join me in welcoming Professor Devaleena Das. Professor Stanlie James, Emerita. Stanlie James presented remarks for a roundtable on transnational feminism at the NWSA annual meeting in Baltimore, Maryland in 2017. It was later published in Meridians, Feminism, Race, Transnationalism in October of 2019, volume 18, number 2. James served as Vice Provost for Inclusion and Community Engagement at ASU, Arizona State University, from 2016 to 2021. Prior to that assignment, Professor James held a number of administrative positions at both the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Arizona State University, including as chair of the Afro-American Studies Department, director of African and African American Studies at ASU, and later director of Women's Studies Research Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Stanlie James. Yafrainy Familia is an assistant professor of Spanish and American Culture Studies at Washington University in St. Louis. She just finished her PhD, by the way, also. Her research is situated at the nexus of Caribbean and Latinx cultural studies, visual culture, Black and Latinx feminisms, and critical geography. Her current book project examines how contemporary Caribbean women and queer artists use their creative platforms to disrupt the cartographies of colonial modernity and imagine radical forms of geographic freedom. She is also a Solidarity Fellow in the Diaspora Solidarities Lab, where she works in the Survival of a People micro lab. Join me in welcoming Yafrainy Familia. And finally, last but certainly not least, is Dr. Ranjoo Herr, who is a professor of philosophy at Bentley University here in Massachusetts. She has published widely on topics of feminist theory and political philosophy, such as decolonial feminism, third world feminism, transnational feminism, Confucian feminism, nationalism, collective self-determination, human rights, and colonialism in diverse peer-reviewed journals, such as Meridians, Hypatia, Feminist Formations, Frontiers, Political Theory, and International Theory. She is currently working on a monograph entitled Confucian Feminism and Gender Equality, a Decolonial Feminist Theory. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Herr. I will turn the panel over now to the moderator, and will also signal to you, in case you missed it, that the works of some of our scholars and authors here today are also available in case you'd like to buy the book and get them to maybe sign it for you after this panel. Thank you so much. Dr. Nagar.
Thank you so much. There. Okay, it's working now. Can you hear me? Thank you, Janetta. Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be moderating this opening session of today on transnational feminist solidarities. And I'm really honored to serve as a moderator for this panel where we'll be holding a conversation across the work of these 4 authors who were just introduced to us today. So each of our panelists engage with transnational feminisms through very different but complementary and very provocative entry points. And in the process, they give us tools to energize a vibrant conversation on various tensions, possibilities, impossibilities that surround the theme of our panel, Transnational Feminist Solidarities. So specifically, the conversation will be centered on specific articles that our panelists have published in Meridians. So Devaleena Das's article is entitled, "What Transnational Feminisms Has Not Disrupted Yet Toward a Quilted Epistemology," which appeared in Meridians in 2023. Professor Stanley James's remarks for a roundtable on transnational feminism that were presented at NWSA Baltimore in 2017 and appeared in Meridians in 2019. Ranjoo Herr's article entitled Reclaiming Third World Feminism, or Why Transnational Feminism Needs Third World Feminism, appeared in 2014. And Yafrainy Familia's article from 2025, which was titled Curating Transnational Feminist Solidarities in Born and Flames, Feminist Futures. So the way we are going to approach this conversation is that I'm going to ask some questions about the concerns and commitments that guide the work of our panelists when it comes to transnational feminist solidarities. So my first set of questions is focused on previous engagements with transnational feminist solidarities that you draw on or critique. Specifically, some of the questions are, how do you deploy, engage, or frame your central concerns around specific theoretical interventions or genealogies of transnational feminism in the singular or transnational feminisms in the plural? And what critical feminist approaches to questions of power, oppression, and colonialism? So for instance, in your articles, you talk about racial capitalism, heteropatriarchy, globalization. So what critical approaches to these questions of power, oppression, and colonialism, as well as what kinds of possibilities and impossibilities of solidarity and justice are you concerned with in the literature? And then, of course, what you have found generative and why, and the kinds of absences and gaps and pitfalls in the existing frameworks that motivated you to make your interventions. So let's begin with.
I'm going to ask you to pull the microphones
closer. Yeah, okay. So take it away. Who wants to start?
Shall we go for 5 minutes each?
Yes, 5 minutes, approximately 5 minutes each.
I can start if you want. Or
Is it?
or I think.
No, go
Professor-
ahead. I was just moving.
Yeah.
By the order.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Shall we?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Just make sure you use the microphone.
Okay.
That one's not working.
Okay.
So then
That one
pass
is
it on.
transcribed.
So just to be mindful of time, I will directly jump to the question, but I just want to say in a sentence that, okay, it is such an honor. Everything is being shared yesterday, but I just want to take a moment to I have never seen another journal that gives the space to bring in so many women of color's voices from different, and people of color voices from different parts of the world. So this is such an honor to be here today. To go back to your question, Professor Nagar, I think I'm going to start saying that when I first started, when I was in my undergrads, feminism in India was very Western, white, mainstream, where we didn't know at that time what was transnational feminism. But by the time when I came in my PhD and started looking at works of Nagar, Mohanty, Alexander, Kaplan, Ansel Dua, Sherry Moraga, just to name a few, I was just in awe. And it was so much with affection that I learned so many key things that those structures offered me, crossing the borders, not just sexual identity, but and not just national nation state, but also beyond various like spiritual and epistemological, and then the interconnectedness that those frameworks taught us. Interconnectedness, it's not just across various forms of feminisms that existed at that time, but also going beyond the singular definition of womanhood, going beyond, global sisterhood, homogenization of global sisterhood, showing interconnectedness. Before that, it was all about colonialism being taught separately, militarism being taught separately, capitalism being taught separately, but showing the interconnectedness that transnational feminism brought in with Black feminist intersectional theory, then interrogating privilege within the feminist framework itself, the various hierarchies, bringing in disability, class, and caste, and of course, decolonizing the epistemology itself. Those are the things that came to me, and I was in awe. And that was the beginning of my journey with transnational feminism. But then what I talked in that article was the challenge was still there, and I know Meridians is doing one such fantastic work, but we still need to do, which is about the knowledge supply chain between global North and global South in this academic industrial complex, where, President Simon yesterday was talking about Toni Morrison at Princeton, the case, and that is where that brings the question of the market value of higher education at the intersection of class mobility, geopolitical hegemony, and capitalist valuation. So I know Meridian is doing a great job pushing that, but I think transnational feminism still is epistemically provincial. And solidarity here is not just across borders and identities and culture, but also epistemic legitimacy that we need to talk about. So I think, this is one thing that this global North, global South knowledge, supply chain. The other thing I need to mention that transnational feminism needs to intervene is feminist engagement with AI and human machine assemblage. This is a second gap that is very urgent, and this is not we have fully grappled with. I know data feminism has come in, but as a body theorist myself, I ask the question that, how does AI reproduce the colonial logic of data extraction? How do we rethink agency and vulnerability when both human and algorithm actor participate in producing knowledge in that same colonial format? So for me, I think transnational feminist solidarities need to intervene here to disrupt this pathologization and criminalization of bodies of color, of women's body, of queer body through machine learning, and to reclaim that language of care, fairness, relational ethics in digital context.
Should we just go this way?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, this would be fine. Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. So actually, I'm going to answer, the first and second question together, and then the third one. So I hope you will give me a little bit more time. So first of all, let me just start by saying thank you very much for the invitation to, discuss my work among such esteemed colleagues and wonderful Smith students. It just feels wonderful. I loved it last night. So I'm very honored. So, actually, I identify myself basically as a third world feminist, or I have been. I'm going to explain how third world feminism relates to transnational feminism as I continue. But I'm a philosopher and a third world feminist. And so let me just begin by how I began my journey as a third world feminist. So when I began to dabble in feminist philosophy many, many, many decades ago, I began to sense hints of condescension and patronizing towards third world women in white feminism. And so when I first encountered Chandra Mohanty's early work in third world feminism, I can honestly say that scales fell from my eyes. It was like a revelatory experience. And so I became an avid convert to third world feminism. And in particular, I found her critique of white global feminism's assertion that women across the globe can unite based on their shared biology as homogenizing and historically reductive, thoroughly convincing. What I really appreciate in Mohanty's third world feminism is its two mandates. The first one is that women's oppression and their modes of resistance in the third world must be identified by studying historically situated intersections of gender, race, class, and nation pertaining to their particular locations. And second, since third world women have engaged in various forms of local activism, their historical and political agency must be reclaimed and due respect conferred. So unfortunately, though, third world feminism had a very short tenure, it seems like. And in its place, transnational feminism began to gain more influence. But my focus has been on nationalist feminism in the third world, because I took it to be representative of third world feminism. And although nationalism has a bad rap, nationalism in the third world is polycentric nationalism, and this is a term that I use in my work, which is predicated on the notion that all nations deserve equal respect. I understand the nation as a large community predicated on a common culture to which members feel a sense of belonging. Polycentric nationalism has been the driving force of decolonization, and polycentric nationalist feminists, or nationalist feminists in short, for short, share with their male counterparts the aspiration for national independence, but demand gender equality from the male counterparts. And I take nationalist feminisms in the third world as paradigmatic examples of third world feminism. Hence, I believe that nations and nationalisms are not incompatible with third world feminism. So transnational feminism became ascendant, and I like the premise of transnational feminism. Don't get me wrong. There were like two branches of transnational feminism, and in my Meridians work, I focused on Grewal and Kaplan's version. And similar to Mohanty's third world feminism, they argue that they were motivated, and I quote, to expose the unwarranted universalization of gender espoused by white global feminism, unquote. And they also accept the two aforementioned mandates of third world feminism. Yet, in asserting that postmodernity generates scattered hegemonies, they claim that the global-local binary is no longer relevant. As a corollary, they reject nation and nationalism as representative of the local, as irrelevant to feminism. So in my article, I have argued that this is inconsistent with the transnational feminists' insistence that feminists engage with scattered hegemonies wherever they occur, and I quote, in their historicized particularity, unquote. Not only is the nation the particular context in which third world feminists must struggle against patriarchy, but collaboration with their male counterparts is necessary for maintaining national sovereignty and promoting national democracy. More seriously, I've argued that transnational feminist emphasis on the transnational is eerily reminiscent of the global or universal in white feminist discourse. And, if divorced from the local and national in the third world, then I believe that transnational may have scanty connection to the reality on the ground, or worse, the particular applicable only to a limited range of instances may pose as a false universal. And so just a short, this is going to be my answer to the second question that you posed. So about transnational feminist solidarities, which I believe is really important. In my view, transnational feminist solidarity that satisfies the two aforementioned third world feminist mandates must be predicated on alliances and solidarities among third world feminists who are working in their local national context. What it should not be, I believe, is some conception of transnational representing the viewpoint of third world women of color, feminists of color, living and theorizing in the Western context that is divorced from the reality of third world feminists in their local national contexts. Thank you.
Is this on?
I think maybe, Baba, do you want to try this?
Is it? Okay. All right. Thank you. Good morning. So I am delighted to be here. I'm still not close enough. How about that? Okay. So I'm delighted to be here, and thank you so much for the hospitality that you are sharing with us. It's been a wonderful experience thus far. I'm especially interested in coming to Smith because I too am an undergraduate of a, as they call it now, single-sex institution. From Spelman College. So it's interesting to be here as well. Okay. I have to say that to me, that very first question was challenging because I never quite thought of myself as engaging in a specific, quote, a specific theoretical interventions or genealogies of transnational feminisms. I was like, whoa, okay. Rather, I would more, even closer? Yeah, okay. This is the first time I've used a computer to give a talk, so I'm trying to come into the 21st century. Okay. I was gonna say that I usually simply define myself as a Black feminist who has been fascinated by the work of other Black feminists engaged in the critical work of struggling against the destruction wrought by what I call the family of isms, racism, sexism, classism, and homophobia, and their cousins, including but not limited to ageism, ableism, and transphobia. Nor has my Black feminism been confined to the United States, but rather seeks to understand how Black folks in the diaspora, particularly within the content of Africa, are coping with their versions of families of isms. I have tried to listen carefully to how African women identify themselves and their concerns, and how African feminists on the continent and throughout the diaspora define and contextualize these issues. For example, decades ago, I was a co-convener of the Women's Caucus of the African Studies Association. In those days, one of the issues that captured lurid international attention was what I refer to as female genital cutting. At the time, I was serving as the co-convener. Alice Walker and Pratibha Parmar's film, Warrior Marks, had been released. At the meeting that year, I learned that African women were absolutely incensed about that film. They felt, some of you are too young to know about that, but yeah, okay. But they felt it was unfair and inaccurate, to say the least. I will never forget hearing one woman state that she felt as if African women had been publicly reduced to their genitalia. It still makes me want to cry. It became very clear to me that American feminists, including some African American feminists, were not properly engaged in the practice of transnational sisterhood. That is, they were not listening to the very real and complicated concerns of African women. This led to co-editing an anthology with Claire Robinson entitled Genital Cutting and Transnational Sisterhood, Disputing US Polemics. That book took pains to describe the different kinds of cutting that occurred, where specific kinds of cutting were practiced, when it was done, and why, and who was doing it. It also addressed our facile assumption that the parents who subjected their daughters to such vile practices were guilty of child abuse. With that volume, our hope was to provide accurate information that would allow us to address the issues appropriately in a manner that would not alienate our African sisters on the ground trying to deal with the issues from their own knowledge as members of these various societies. In essence, we were trying not to be the ugly American who were secure in our ignorance about each other's culture and what was wrong with them. We were attempting to be supportive of the African sisters as they struggled to overcome such practices by talking to American feminists about assuming the role of supporters rather than leaders in the struggles to abolish such practices. Much later, I think my article that appeared in the Meridians continues on with my efforts to understand the contours of African feminism and Black or African American feminism. Some of you may recall that this article explored two critical documents that set out the ways in which women in these two related but very different groups define themselves and their feminist philosophies. You may recall that the Combahee River Collective first appeared in 1977, and I am assuring, and I'm assuming that this audience is quite familiar with that important manifesto. Some of you may also be familiar with another equally important manifesto to our understanding of transnational feminism. In November of 2006, 29 years after Combahee, over 100 avowed African feminists from around the continent and across the diaspora met for 4 days in Accra, Ghana. And one of them is right here today in this body. They formulated and published and adopted the Charter of Feminist Principles of African Feminists. It was first published in 2007, simultaneously in French and English. The renowned African feminist Amina Mama told me later that the African feminists left that meeting with the intention of publishing their charter in African languages beyond French and English. It was their intention that African women across the continent should have access to the document in their own languages. Can I very briefly say?
Yeah.
Okay, very briefly, this document focused on naming patriarchy in all its various manifestations as the main culprit that they were struggling with. They were and are committed to the struggles to dismantle patriarchy and to recognize the critical work of women in the struggles to develop their cultures throughout Africa. I reread this piece just recently, and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to do so because it provides us with another critically important lens to understanding the complexities of transnational feminism.
Thank you,
Okay.
Professor.
I want to echo so much of what have already been said this morning. And again, thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor for me to be here. It was an honor when Meridians accepted my publication that just came out in this very issue. So I'm going to assume that most of you have not read it, but I'm so proud to be part of it. And I also have to share that this is my first peer review publication. And it's been wonderful to hear that Meridians has been the first of so many others in the room. And I see it just as a sign of good luck for my career. So thank you so much. And in terms of the question of just the genealogy that I was engaged in my article, I want to offer a little bit of context. My essay offers a transnational feminist analysis of an exhibit that was curated by South Asian American curator Jasmine Wahi at the Bronx Museum of the Arts in 2021. And the exhibit was entitled Born in Flames, Feminist Futures. And I went into this exhibit as a second-year grad student. I went to see the work of Dominican Haitian artist Firelei Baez, and I didn't have the intention of producing this piece before going and engage in the work. And part of my answer to the question is that in that moment, I had just taken one of my first feminist theory courses ever. And I had all of these ideas in my mind. And I feel like this exhibit offered me part of that genealogy. And just to give you an example, when I came into the exhibit and thinking about this idea of feminist futurities, I thought it was going to be more, futuristic in a way. And so I was surprised to realize that many of the works in the exhibit were in fact rooted in the past, in the colonial and imperial and patriarchal histories of the global South and North. But that Jasmine Wahi, as a curator, has done a beautiful job in being both caring and careful in terms of putting these works together, one next to the other in the space of the Bronx Museum, that it's a local institution serving mostly Black and Latinx communities in the Bronx. And what was surprising to me was to see how these artists were in conversation with the radical cultural and feminist production of the 1960s and 70s and 80s. And so in a way, this artist, alongside the work of Jasmine Wahi, was teaching me things about what it means to think transnationally about feminist praxis and solidarity. And so it was a learning experience for me, and the reason why I kept thinking about it and decided to begin drafting the piece. And so one part of that genealogy came from the artwork itself. I'll say, for instance, the work of Firelei Baez that was exposed in the exhibit. The description of the work had a little quote from Firelei Baez. And she said that her understanding, and this is a Dominican Haitian artist in diaspora in New York, her understanding of a Black feminist future was inspired by the words of Nina Simone, who in an interview in the 1960s said that her approach to the future was a joyful, vibrant future without fear. And to me, it was so wonderful to see how this Dominican Haitian artist in diaspora was engaged in Nina Simone in the 60s and was creating work that was envisioning possible feminist futures for us. And that led me to thinking, what does it mean to curate transnational feminist solidarities? What does it mean to be in solidarity with others, even when we are not together in the same space, right? But, and thinking about that as epistemic legitimacy that was mentioned before, what does it mean to recognize those who provided the foundation for us to be in this room today? On the other hand, something that I both engaging and critique in the article is who curates transnational feminist solidarities and practices. And that led me to just researching a little bit more about some major feminist exhibits that had taken place and that engaged works from different artists across the world. And what I realized is that, especially in the United States, exhibits like Global Feminisms that was groundbreaking and was at the Brooklyn Museum in 2007 and brought so many works from across the globe. So it was really, in terms of scope and diversity, it was tremendously rich. However, most of these exhibits that had a transnational lens had been curated by white women. And so part of the intervention that I make in this article is what does it mean for women of color, for Black and brown women, to imagine feminist presence and futures. And I thought that even though this exhibit was smaller in scale, it was only 14 artists, I think there was something radical to me. And in terms of having a woman like Jasmine Wahi have the audacity to imagine feminist futures by engaging the work of other women of color, of Black, brown, femme, trans women. So it was such a capacious futurity, and I thought there was something special in that.
Thank you all. Thank you for those really powerful reflections. I already see this really important thread because Professor Das started with this epistemologically provincial nature of some of these conversations. And then Professor Herr talked about third world feminisms, how they were taken over by transnational feminisms, but the political and intellectual implications of that move. And then Professor James, with you reminding us about the transnational sisterhood that was already there in Black feminisms, but also the ways in which there were those very important generative tensions that shaped these conversations. And then Professor Familia, you talking about how futures are already rooted in the past, and also this question of who curates transnational practices. So some of you, my next question has already been addressed by some of you, but that question focuses on the particular feminist texts, cultural productions, or political engagements that you use to address the concerns that you have highlighted, and how does your intervention or engagement imagine new possibilities for transnational feminist solidarities, or if you don't like that term, we can set that aside, just feminist solidarities in the current political moment. So maybe we can begin with you.
With me?
Yeah,
Okay.
why not?
I feel like I already answered part
Yes.
of that question, right? And what I wanted to say about this particular question is that it's not a coincidence that the arts are under attack right now, and that the government, in the context of the US, is coming for scholars in the space of the university, but also for the cultural memory and production in the space of the museum, and also the activism in the streets, right? And I think that last night it was so beautiful to hear how Meridians cares about those different spheres, and they all work together. And what I would say is that the arts are tremendously important, especially in this particular moment, because in order to be able to create and conceive a different political landscape and a different present and future, we first need to be able to imagine it. And it's often artists and cultural producers who do that work. And we may even think about novels published 20, 30 years ago, how it can almost feel like they predict the future. And so artists do that. And we need that as scholars in order to then be able to create different frameworks and put these ideas into words that then activate politically, that is activated in the streets, right? And so I think we all need each other and we need to protect the arts. And something, when I wrote this piece, and of course it was my first article, and I wonder, is this going to matter by the time it comes out? You know, it's an exhibit that happened in 2021. Would this still be relevant? I didn't imagine that the arts will be in the conditions and facing the challenges that they are today. And so I'm happy that I kept going with it and that I presented it and submitted to Meridians. And something else that I would like to say in terms of what this kind of work offers, there are many limitations in terms of what art can do, right? When it comes to life and death situations and when it comes to transforming and having a direct impact in different circumstances. So I'm not here to say arts are going to save the world. However, I do think that there is something powerful about activating the space of the museum, of the gallery, a community-led space. And something else that was brought up yesterday is the idea of joy that art and culture brings. And so in that sense as well, to me, the idea of being able to engage cultural production, to feel joy and pleasure, and to be able to share that with others, it's also important work, especially under the circumstances that we are right now.
Thank you so much. Professor James, do you want to?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So much of my work has centered on international, thank you, international human rights as a scholar who is not a lawyer, but sees the critical importance of international human rights beyond law schools and outside of the United Nations. In international human rights, I see so many instances of the grittiness of constructing international feminist solidarities. My most recent book is called Practical Audacities, Black Women and International Human Rights. So while acknowledging the critically important contributions of African-American women have made in the struggles for civil and political rights, this book broadens the focus to examine the work of Black women who have come to the realization that our need for rights cannot be realized by focusing only on the first generation of civil and political rights. Our human rights are comprised of economic, social, and cultural rights, and the less well-defined collective solidarity rights. 14 Black women were featured in this book. Each one has been interviewed extensively. I was gonna say, how's that going on? Each woman has been interviewed extensively about the way that she sees and does international human rights. And I wanted to think about this in this session. There's so many to pick from, but I'm gonna focus on Gabriel Kirk McDonald and also on Patricia Sellers. First, let me ask you, do any one of you know who those people are? Is there anybody in here who has ever heard of them? Okay, this is criminal. You need to know who they are. Okay, they are exemplars of developing cultural relationships between not cultural, but critical relationships between humanitarian law and human rights. There are two very important but distinctive aspects of international law. Humanitarian law is often referred to as the Geneva Conventions. So it focuses on the ways war should be conducted, like treatment of captured and imprisoned soldiers and sailors, protecting hospitals from enemy attacks, and treatment of civilians, et cetera. Obviously, this is not in play in the wars that we are seeing that are happening right now. But know that they are committing international crime, humanitarian crimes. One aspect of international law has been the development of in the area of women's international human rights. Gabriel Kirk McDonald was a civil rights attorney with the NAACP in the 60s and 70s in Houston. I'm cutting this short. She was also appointed by Jimmy Carter to the federal judgeship in Texas. When she retired from that, she became a professor of law at the Thurgood Marshall School of Law at Texas Southern University. She was nominated to be a judge on the International Tribunal of the former Yugoslavia and secured the necessary votes in the General Assembly to be appointed to this position at The Hague. And she was elected by other judges from around the world to be the Chief Justice of that tribunal. Patricia Sellers was another African-American attorney who secured a position with the tribunal and eventually became the chief prosecutor of those who had been captured and were being tried for war crimes. Now, I'm telling you about these two women because they expanded international humanitarian laws to include defining rape as a war crime. This has never been done before. Prior to this designation, rape was just considered a normal byproduct of war. Sellers, and especially meticulously crafted legal definitions of rape and then used those definitions to prosecute war criminals, which were charged and brought to the court. They not only created the international jurisprudence around the crime of rape, they also moved to have rape included in the definition of genocide. This is absolutely historic, okay? Sellers prosecuted these cases in the court at The Hague and also in the International Tribunal on Rwanda, because you might remember that there was this horrendous war in Rwanda. Judge McDonald and her colleagues presided over those cases. And these are the things that we can use now as we look at what's happening, for example, in the wars that we see going on in the world now. I'm running out of time, but the other thing I was going to say was that those two were intricately involved in the Women's International War Crimes Tribunal on Japan's military sexual slavery. McDonald presided over it, and Sellers was one of the prosecuting attorneys. And this is when they tried to bring Japan to the point where they recognized the atrocities that were committed under their name in World War II against women from all over Southeast Asia. So anyway, that's the way that I have entered into this discussion on transnational feminisms, because what's happening is those women are engaged in international human rights of women and bringing it to the attention of the world in different kinds of ways. I cannot tell you how important it is for rape to be recognized as a war crime. Okay.
Yeah, I'm so, okay. I'm so glad that Professor Nagar framed the question when talking about text as text, cultural engagements, and imagining new possibilities, where you gave so many options, because what this discussion is flowing through is that text is no longer limited. Like when we talk about feminist theory, it is no longer limited to textual print. And that is not to demean, of course, scholarship and printing or cultural artifacts, because text is also about voices, lived experiences, and bodies that we carry. So what I am practicing now in my classroom pedagogy is bringing the community voices directly, the subjective voices, rather than we speaking on behalf of them. So for example, Indigenous and Black doulas who are working with maternal mortality and child mortality. Also about, if you look at rural healthcare, the palliative care and the elderly care, the unburdened, gendered burden of caretaking, the sexism rooted in that, or the voices in the communities. I know, Richa, you do amazing work with street theater and dance. That's where also the voices come in. We have seen in during George Floyd's murder, the Black Lives Matter protests, dancing. Those are the texts that I would love, and I bring that in the classroom space. Also in India, in rural Eastern India, the voices that I often invite through Zoom is called the Chuppi Thoro Baitak, or the Breaking the Silence, which is talking about menstrual taboos and hygiene, health hygiene. So these are some of the texts that I see as existing as community voices around us, which we need to bring and decolonize the colonial space of education. But also the text that I want to quickly mention, two texts, is one is Tricia Harsey, the Black feminist, who is working on rest as resistance. And this is very important through activism, through practices, which is about the extraction of labor from bodies of color, the racial capitalist demand of constant productivity. And this is again connected to what I talked about, even with algorithmic system of, putting us always under work, surveillance, the culture of disposability. So that's one book that I am embracing a lot. And the other one is the Aboriginal novelist, Ambelina Kayamulina, who many of you know is also the daughter of Sally Morgan, Australian novelist Sally Morgan. She's doing amazing artwork, which is about producing a series of visual artwork applying indigenous futurist thinking in order to resist what is the concept of AI in Western concept. So I think these together, these community narrative voices, these artwork, these embodied practices, these are together what I have called in my article, quilted epistemology in practice, which is, what I'm saying is basically fragments which are stitched together through geographies, disciplines, and social locations. So basically, transnational feminism push us beyond the classroom and beyond the written page, in the community, in the environmental justice, in embodied care. And then they remind us that solidarity is not only conceptual, but it is also affective, it is lived, it is sensory. So it happens in circles of listening, in acts of care, and in shared grief and rest.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for those really, really important insights. We are sort of like, I'm thinking about the time, and do we have a little bit of cushion to?
And I think Ranjoo might, if you have any answers.
Oh, no, I just
You've
skipped
already
over,
combined
yes,
the-
and
the-
yes.
The two.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move to my third question, but I will ask all of you to just see if we can, you can do it. Do it in like two or 3 minutes each, so that we have some time for conversation with the audience. So my final question, which I think just already you have been talking about these very important ideas of, the practical audacities, the quilted epistemologies, where grief and rest find centrality alongside how we think about voice, and fighting for the arts in times when they are under severe attack. So you've been talking about those interventions and possibilities, but specifically, if you could take a couple of minutes to think about or to share with us, where do you see some of the challenges as well as ongoing possibilities for advancing the interventions that you make in your Meridians article? And also, obviously, this is an ongoing work for all of you. So if you could share a bit about the directions that your reflections or arguments are taking. And maybe Ranjoo, you can start us off since you can respond to the last question.
If I may, is it okay if I take a little bit longer?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, I really enjoyed everybody's references to, and I really liked your quilted epistemology. This is very relevant to what I'm thinking of in terms of transnational feminist solidarity. But yeah, I think I'm going to skip over a lot of things here, but how I kind of focused on how my ideas evolved since 2014 when I wrote that paper. And so I did have an opportunity to revisit the topic of third world feminism recently. And when I did that, I have come to realize that third world feminism may not be sufficiently inclusive. And because many third world states are multi-ethnic because their boundaries were imposed by the colonizers. And this may explain why many third world states have experienced debilitating ethnic conflicts with indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities, sometimes referred to as the fourth world, bearing the brunt of state oppression by their undemocratic and corrupt third world states. So under these circumstances, the disadvantaged groups cannot be expected to join third world nationalisms, which I have been championing. Neither can fourth world feminists be expected to join third world feminists. If a fourth world community is nested within a third world state, power inequalities exist between fourth world and third world feminists, and the latter's demand may unjustifiably override the former's demands. So to resolve such conflicts, I think we need a broader category of feminism. And recently I have come to believe that decolonial feminism may actually do the job. Because, the overarching principle of decoloniality, I understand to be overcoming coloniality and its universal fictions. And the practical conflict between third world feminists and fourth world feminists demands can be resolved by resorting to this principle. So what do I mean by this? What do I mean by decoloniality? And I follow Latin American decolonial theorists in this. And according to them, coloniality is shorthand for colonial matrix of power, which is a set of structural relations and flows constitutive of the Eurocentric modern world system. And as the conjoined twin of modernity, Eurocentric coloniality has persisted even after colonialism ended around the end of Second World War. Despite its cultural specificity, which is Eurocentric, coloniality has maintained and imposed on others universal fictions. So, decoloniality, I believe, requires overcoming coloniality and its universal fictions by promoting pluriversality, which envisions a world composed of multiple worlds. And I think what you mentioned about quilted epistemology fits in really well with this idea. So promoting pluriversality entails empowering all cultural, including subaltern communities, to foster meaningful cultural ways of life through collective self-determination, free from fear of domination and oppression by external hegemons. So basically, I'm just going to skip over a lot of things that I mentioned here. So decolonial feminism, as I conceive it, envisions a feminist world in which women in different cultural communities transform their communities and cultures according to culturally sensitive conceptions of gender equality by insisting on their membership rights to participate as equal members in collective self-determination. Third world feminism is decolonial feminism in the context of third world states, and fourth world feminism is decolonial feminism in the context of fourth world cultural communities. And so transnational feminist solidarity, according to this way of thinking, is solidarity not only among third world and fourth world feminists tirelessly promoting gender equality in their local and national contexts, but also feminists in the West, whether they be women of color or white feminists, who confer respect on decolonial feminist agency in the common struggle towards the decolonial ideal of pluriversality. So I'll end it there. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking about the women in my book on practical audacity. One of the women that I think about, I'm more, yeah. Usually I don't have trouble projecting. But at any rate, one of the women that I think about who is, the way that I think about how this works is what are women doing? How are they operating? And that we can learn from them. And one of the ones in the book that I talk about is a woman named Aisha Imam. I'm not sure if any of you have met her or not. You know Aisha. She's an amazing woman. And what is very interesting to me about her is that she is a person who has a sense of what international human rights are about, but she is working through this through one of her organizations was Women Living Under Muslim Law, WILUM, you know. And what I like about that is that we over here have a sense of all Muslims are alike. They all, think alike. We don't think that about ourselves, but we have no problems thinking about that, about quote unquote, the other. But she talks about the fact that she got involved with this organization, which is active around all over Africa. It's active also in other parts of the world where Muslims exist. And they talk about the differences that exist in Islam and how you have to understand Islam in a way, if you're going to practice it, either as a religion or if you see it as your cultural background, you have to understand what the Quran and the Hadith are saying and how they have been misused to bring about the subjugation of women. And it's interesting to listen how she, talks about, for example, there was this notion that in Africa, genital cutting, going back to that again, was Islamic. And it's not. It's not practiced in Saudi Arabia. It's not even practiced in Iran. But you didn't begin to know that until you talked to people, women who were living under Muslim law around the world. And to find out, some women living under Muslim law have to cover themselves. Some do not. Okay, there's all kinds of things that are different. So they are exploring their feminism and their religion at the same time. And I see that as another example of transnational feminism because they're living in different parts of the world and they're practicing this religion in different ways. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I'll try to keep it quick. I know we're running out of time. And I want to make sure we have a little time for questions. I'm just going to say that writing this piece during my second year as a grad student offered a foundation for my dissertation work and for thinking about transnational feminist praxis in the context of the Caribbean, which is fragmented linguistically and culturally in a way that it shouldn't. And I think that visual culture provides a common ground and language to think about the Caribbean, and this is the work that I have been doing since working on this piece, and what I hope to continue doing in my current book project. And I'll also say that because of everything that is happening right now, I've been thinking beyond the space of the traditional hegemonic museum, because that has many limitations, and one of them is access. And so I've been looking at community-led curatorial and cultural projects in places like Puerto Rico, and particularly women-led projects that center Caribbean women's ways of knowing and being. And so that's what I will say. Thank you.
I'm going to invite Devaleena.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I want to bring just at this time shortage, I just want to bring one challenge that I face every day, which is transnational feminism, we know, is very interdisciplinary. In practice, it still remains disciplinary, circulating mostly within gender studies, cultural studies, humanities, and social sciences. But I think its critical insight about power, coloniality, embodiment, and intersectionality can translate into other disciplines and other fields. Myself teaching in the medical school, I see how in medicine, public health, and clinical education, even those who are aware of the social determinants of health, they are far removed from what transnational feminism brings in. So I think this awareness is necessary in other fields, and this is where transnational feminism can interrogate. I just gave one example, but I'm sure there are more, where enough colonial logics, which is embedded, for example, in medical knowledge, in anatomy, in care providing, this is one area that transnational feminism needs to challenge. And I feel it's same for many other disciplines.
Thank you. All right, at this point, we are going to open it up. I'm sure there are lots of comments and reflections that are, I think my chair is broken. Oh, no, there's something else. Anyway, we'll open it up for, yeah, there's a hole here where the chair is sinking. So, yeah, can we have some comments, questions, reflections?
Oh, well, first, thank you all. This was such a informative, really engaging panel. So to all of you, you did great. My name is Janelle Hobson, and I just heard, different resources that were mentioned, and I wanted to see if you could, again, just for my own, enrichment, I think there was a novel that was mentioned about AI and another one about rest. I'm also interested in the kind of exhibits that are taking place in the Caribbean. And then also, I think Stanlie James in particular, there was the reference to, I think Aisha Imam, was that the name? Yeah, so I didn't hear what the, yes, okay, is that it? Okay, the practical audacity, okay, thank you.
Let's take a couple more comments and questions.
Thank you so much for this wonderful panel and for sharing your work. My name is Juan Sebastián Ospina. I'm a faculty member here at Smith in the philosophy department. This is a question maybe for Professor Herr, and maybe obviously for the panel if they want to say something. I was very interesting about your kind of a major point that the idea of the third world nationalism that you're advocating, and you provide us with kind of a definition of what you think is nationalism and a nation predicated in this idea of feeling of belonging. But I'm wonder how you think about certain forms of nationalism that right now has been or are being associated with different kinds of populism, right? And it's been charged by being regressive, right, in terms of the policies, kind of anti-democratic, and the way in which that kind of nationalism is organized has been telling us that that's just mob and not kind of legitimate forms of organization of the people. Nevertheless, I reject that idea, particularly someone coming from Latin America. I think there is an emancipatory form in certain ideas of populism. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more, what does this idea of nationalism that you advocate carry that kind of a transnational or emancipatory force? So you can expand a little bit more maybe to this disentangle with this wrong association of certain form of nationalism with populism. So that's the question. Thank you.
More questions? Is there
Oh, yeah.
another question or
Yeah, maybe the
comment
questions
that is
first.
feeling really urgent? Okay, so I'll, invite you, Professor Herr, to start, and then maybe the other panelists can also respond to both sets of comments.
Thank you very much. When you said that you're a philosopher, I imagined you might be asking me a question, but I was right. So I think that's a great question. And, and as somebody who has been thinking about nationalism for a very long time, I am definitely aware of different conceptions of nationalism. And so if you don't clarify what you mean by nationalism, then I think we will get into a muddle of confusion. So for me, as I mentioned very briefly, and I would love to talk with you if you want to talk later, but as I mentioned before, the kind of nationalism that I'm advocating is polycentric nationalism, not ethnocentric. So that's like a one big clarification there. So ethnocentric is, represented in Nazism, fascism, Italy, and all that. Very, very aggressive, and like the notion is my nation is the best, so we can dominate others. So that's the ethnocentrism that I'm opposed to. A polycentric nationalism is represented in decolonial movement, basically, like when third world countries, when they were forming, they said that, why do you say that we don't have any right to be a nation? We share a culture, and we want to promote our cultural way of life within our nation. So that's basically a very simplified way of defining it. But polycentric nationalism is not about asserting that we are the only nation worthy of having a state, but other nations really have equal status. And so if you think of it that way, then any culture, any like large enough culture that can have the aspiration for collective self-determination should be able to promote their nationalism. So the kind of nationalism that is being misappropriated right now in populism, white nationalism, for example, I think that's a really wrong way of thinking about nationalism, because the way that I think of nationalism, if it's applicable to the United States, is as the nation of the United States. And our nation consists of so many different groups. It's not just white people. And so when they argue that we, white people, are the only ones who have the right to promote our interest, that is, ethnocentrism kind of like misapplied. So I don't know if that answers your question. Thank you.
Other panelists, do you want to
Answer the question. Answer the question.
There's a question there.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
We'll still haven't answered one question, the
Yeah,
first one.
there was another comment that was for Professor James, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to
No,
respond
I
to the
think there was a
first?
question for you.
I can say that. So I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. A quick answer to the two references that you asked. One was the NAP ministry practice. And the book is called Rest as Resistance by Tricia Hersey. And she's doing amazing work about going to campuses, university spaces, where taking nap and showing how rest is a kind of activism. And the other one is by Ambeline Kwamulina. She's an Aboriginal artist and novelist. By profession, she's a legal scholar. She is doing amazing work through art on the connection between human, non-human, and artificial intelligence, which is more than what artificial AI is giving to us, basically, through indigenous futurism. Ambeline, I can give you the name in person, yeah.
Thank you. Please go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, we are not going to take another public question because we have to stay on time, but I am going to invite you all to thank our panelists. And there will be a few minutes before the next panel so that you can ask the questions you might still have. But I want to make sure that our next panel gets its time as well. So thank you all. Thank you, panelists. Brilliant, as always.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, great, great.
Sitting or standing?
I was gonna say, I knew it was gonna be like, but I also expected to introduce you all so that I would already make the connections with the papers. Anyway, but this was amazing, amazing.
But it happens, yeah.
I'm so grateful to you
I'll
for
give you
bringing the reversal and decolonial feminism into the conversation.
So Ambeline
I
Kwamulina
think
is
the
the
takeaway
name.
here is that constant uncertainty
Oh,
of any of these things.
Oh,
I mean, no category at any given time can hold everything, right? So it's this work of continuous disruption.
Aboriginal author. My bad handwriting. So. Thank you so much.
Can you, I think that take a picture of us.
Sitting at the table. Yes.
Thank you.
That was fast, right?
Thank you so much.
Very interesting work you're doing.
I would love to talk also about nationalism part. So interesting because the Kurdish woman in Iraq,
Kurdish,
yeah, where they are the minority
Yeah.
and how they are being tortured by all these neighboring countries.
Yeah.
They weaponize nationalism as a way to liberate the country. And I thought of, having